Alright, hello everyone, Gamebrain here, and we're back today with another Dueling Book rated speed duels game. So today we have myself versus username, and I will be on Peril, and username will be on Armed Dragon, Crystal Beast. Let's get this started. Let's take a look at the opening hands here. I will be, of course, running Desert's Peril, and I open Patchy, Swords, Quala, and Swords. And username opens Conclave, Book of Moon, Melody, and Regeki. So let's take a look. I will go in for the 1600 free damage and set up the first swords, and that's the boards. Ooh, and we see the tiger drawn off the top, but currently username does not have a way to break through my swords at this moment. So we'll see if that changes. With the Regeki there, it should be a pretty easy setup. We're probably going to see the skill activated here. Alright, send the armed, summon armed, and we'll be able to set some of the back row here. Chooses, interestingly enough, not to set the Conclave. I wonder if he's worried about some type of removal, even though Desert's Peril, I don't think most lists actually have been running much back row removal these days. So I think a small misplay here, because you can use Regeki with the tiger that has been set, and you could use Conclave with the tiger that's currently in the monster zone. But nevertheless, let's see how the game plays out. Of course, turn 1 on swords. So, given the state of the Armed Dragon White, I can't actually attempt to burn. However, Patchy does work with the Desert's Peril skill, where if it is flipped face up, the Armed Dragon White would be destroyed. So its effect that nullifies effect damage would no longer be present. I assume I will make a Patchy play. No, I will just set, playing it slow and safe. And, ooh, interesting play by me here. I had forgotten about this. I anticipate the Regeki can take out the swords, which would leave me very vulnerable to Armed White's attack. There's two possible plays I can make here. I could have attempted to summon Patchy to break that. I don't know if there is another Armed White in hand, potentially, so that leaves me open to that play. I can assume not, though, because it wasn't discarded by Melody. Nevertheless, that would be using both of my Desert's Perils, and even though I probably would be able to get a flip on Death's Quala, that would only be 400 damage. So I decide to keep Peril for later on, and instead sacrifice a second swords to kind of stop the Regeki from popping these swords. At least I assume it's Regeki. So I'll go ahead and pass here. And the other white is drawn, so I would have been indeed punished here for attempting to destroy white and circumvent that. Conclave will now be set, and interestingly, Topaz Tiger being switched to defense here. I'm not sure why that is the case, but nevertheless, there will be a pass. Both swords go up a counter. So I'll flip up Patchy here, destroying the dragon. I will now attempt to hit in. I think, once again, a small misplay, setting this tiger to defense. And will both attacks go through? Interestingly enough, I think another misplay here. Conclave could have been flipped face up. Oh, but you can't special summon because of Patchy. So it doesn't end up mattering, actually. I wonder if there's then a reasonable play of using the Regeki, pop the Patchy, which would also enable you to summon white next turn anyway, right? So you use the Regeki, pop the Patchy. When the Death Quala hits in to beat over the Topaz Tiger, you flip the Conclave face up. Then you could potentially use Conclave Effect 1. Send the Tiger that's popped to the back row, bring in a Pegasus. The Pegasus could even pull the Tiger that was popped by Regeki and pull it back up. And then you can even Conclave to bounce next turn as well. I think that set of plays, while also enabling Armed Dragon to be summoned next turn, would have been the optimal line of play here. Let's continue then, though. Will we see another Conclave off the top? So I wonder if at this point there will be an attempt. Oh, we'll see Conclave face up. And we'll see Conclave Effect 2 to bounce. Patchy is going to, interestingly enough, be balanced instead of getting Crystal Regeki'd. That's very interesting. So Patchy will go back to hand. Also, in case you're wondering why I'm surprised, this is an older game. I play username basically every day, probably the most common match in ladder at this point, and also in casuals. So we have quite a large number of games. So I don't remember the details of this specific one. Alright, thumbs up, and we see another conclave being set. Will we see the Armed Dragon summon here? We will see the Armed Dragon playing potentially into the Desert's Peril here, and there will be a pass. So Patchy is a known card. Conclave will be flipped face up. I'm just going to set and pass. Once again, I don't want to risk committing my Desert's Peril. There is an empty hand. I can't currently get value from the Spy, and thus Koala would be burning for basically nothing. So there is no reason for me to commit the skill here. And once again, the other Armed Dragon from hand that could have potentially punished for me committing the skill, but this time there's no back row to be sacrificed for Raigeki to pop the Patchy, so it would have been more safe. Alright, let's see how this continues. Conclave will bounce. The unknown. Once again, I think if that Raigeki had been committed, so many resources would not have to have been used to bounce this Patchy. And the swords will be timed out though this time. So now with swords timed out, I do get the lucky draw into the third swords. Let's see what I will end up doing here. I will activate the swords and set Patchy yet again. Still trying not to use my skill, letting that hand size grow, and of course at the same time, reminder, I can't burn while Armed Dragon White is on the field, so I also have to get rid of that. We will see the Pegasus summon here. I think with the previous line of plays, this play could have happened much earlier on in the game. And we'll see the Raigeki being sent to pop the swords. So this is probably going to be where we see the Armed Dragon hit in. I think misplay here, right? So you don't know what the unknown is, but clearly it's not Patchy because I would have flipped it. The play I think that is reasonable is attacking into the Koala. This is very likely Patchy given what my opponent has seen. I wonder also if I slightly misplayed by activating the swords, because I was expecting that the back row is Raigeki, but I could have also not seen the Pegasus off the top. So I think here you're forced to Armed Dragon in damage step to pop the Patchy. So what's going to end up happening then is that... Also, sorry, let me fix the microphone volume a bit. But what's going to end up happening here is that I think you miss out on beating over something. So let's see if that ends up mattering. So we'll see damage step indeed popping the Patchy. And will there be an attempt to attack into the set card? There will be. So the thing with the set card is I decided against bringing out a Gravekeeper's Curse here, mainly because the Armed Dragon is alive, so I wouldn't get any burn from it. So I'd rather at least attempt to stall in some regard. I only run 2 copies of Spy and 2 copies of Curse, so there's no other targets in the deck. It was either a Curse or a Spy there. I do draw Floodgate Trap Hole, but it looks like there won't be much more I can do for now. Username will be on that Raigeki, but once again, no back row to facilitate it. And we will see the Armed Dragon White hitting in, popping the set, which will keep me alive for an extra turn, since nothing can beat up over the Spy. I do think it's a reasonable play to pop the set there. And I do draw a Book of Moon. I do think here I will attempt to book here, and using this book I assume I will activate the Koala. Oh, I choose not to activate the Koala with Peril. Interesting. Will I set the Koala? I might set the Koala here. Gravekeeper's Spy. The Koala would have burned for an extra 400, so I'm not sure how much worth it is. Maybe keeping it set and hoping it gets hit into... yeah, maybe keeping it set and hope it gets into with 2 cards in hand is a more reasonable play. We'll see the White summoned here, but luckily I have the Floodgate that I said earlier, and this looks like a pretty tough situation for username, as next turn I can attempt to do something. We'll see the skill actually being activated for Transcendence, which will bring out the Pegasus from deck, and this will likely Raigeki my set. So at this point, nothing can beat over nothing can beat over the Spy, and we see Sol and Luna being drawn. Pretty drawn out game here, but that arm white is permanently set for now. I will just pass, presumably hoping to keep this for a potential game. I still have cards in my deck that can burn, so just hoping to draw the cards with the flip effects. Keep passing, still drawing into book here, a pretty stalled out game. Both players looking for a way to either end it or push their advantage. And will we see something come up soon? I will see Patchy, choosing not to set it because I do not want that slot to open up. We'll see Waking the Dragon being drawn in the main deck, and Username will actually just admit defeat, potentially with no way to out this board perhaps, thinking he will lose in deck out. Let's go on to game number 2. Alright, so for the opening hands, I have Gravekeeper's Curse, Swords, Waking, and Floodgate Trap Hole, and Username is on 2 whites and 2 melodies. Very interesting hand from Username. Opting to go first here. That's not such a terrible play into burn. However, I have significantly sided out my deck in anticipation to play around the idea that burn would be what is sided into. So I think this play is very interesting here. I mean, there's multiple ways to play around it. I think a reasonable play is perhaps you Melody of the Awakening Dragon, one of the whites, add both whites, right? But I think if you truly want to greed here, you can actually Melody the Melody to add white and then arm 10, right? And then you skill to thin your deck. You send the armed 10, and potentially you bring out a Crystal Beast in the back row, summon one of the armed whites, and go from there. But we'll see how the turn is played. I think both of those are slightly awkward plays. Username looks like he'll go for the first play here, adding armed 10, and choosing not to add the second white. I think that is a very peculiar play. Maybe it looks like he doesn't want to activate skill, which I think would actually be good to thin the deck. Nevertheless, this way you also end up with one less armed white in hand, because you had to send one of them, perhaps going for some 2-turn play, but I'm not sure how efficient this was. I will also, of course, draw into Penguin Soldier, which is a card I've sided in here. Big think on the plays, probably just going to be setting. I think I'm trying to bait out some removal here, forcing the armed dragon to attack and then maybe pop Waking in the process and keeping my stronger cards for the second round of gameplay. And will we get it? However, Username will safely pop the set, and thus will not pop the back row. At this point, I will summon Patchy to pop the armed white, and I will set the Floodgate, hopefully baiting out the last dragon, which I know is the last card in hand. No swords there, so I can actually bait the summon. I'm hoping there's some way for Username to pop my Patchy. If there isn't, I do win anyway. I think this is a potential misplay on my end, because even though I read that there's no Crystal Beast in hand, I do kind of just lose to normal summon Crystal Beast. And hidden, I would be tempted to perhaps pop the Floodgate there, which would be problematic, but I could always then summon Penguin Soldier and bounce back anything. So we'll see the Gravekeeper's Curse being summoned here, burning, and I will choose to activate the swords here, understanding that my opponent likely doesn't have any back row activated because of how the Crystal Beast synergies work. I think, in retrospect, of course hindsight is 20/20, but if the turn 1 play had been done the way I suggested, there would be a Crystal Beast card in the back row right now, which would have been able to enable either Conclave or Regeki to get rid of the Patchy, and especially if you had done this with Conclave, you'd be able to add presumably Pegasus back to your hand, which would then allow you to summon it, bring another card in the back row to activate Regeki, enabling both of these trap cards while getting you a body and allowing you to summon the armed white, and on top of everything, you'd have an extra armed white in hand. So I think the play of sending Melody with Melody, and then using the skill to summon, to discard the level 10 to summon Armed White, was the play early on for Username, and sadly, the choice of plays there might end up costing him the game. So let's see how that will play out. Username will likely be forced to take full damage here, there's no response. And we will see another Crystal Conclave being drawn. At this point, yeah, I think discard Conclave for the skill. Makes sense. Pegasus being added to hand. Misclick, it's fine. And we will see Conclave bounce. So doing the play that could have been set up preemptively. Oh, and choosing to bounce the swords first, interestingly. Adding Pegasus to hand, presumably summoning here. I chose not to Floodgate Trap Hole that. That's very interesting. I wonder if the play was to Floodgate Trap Hole there, because I do win next turn with Desert's Peril. So I think here what Username could have done is attempted to attack into the Gravekeeper's Curse. But I think if the Regeki had popped Apache, there would be reasonable argument to at least attempt to summon the level white, even though this is Floodgate and we'd still be in the same situation. But let's see. And Username, I think perhaps a misplay, attempting to hit into the Apache, unless he's planning to Crystal Regeki, my Gravekeeper's Curse. But notably, there is game on board. So, interesting interaction. I mean, I also drew Spy, but there's only 2 copies of Curse. And interesting with interaction of Desert's Peril is that the battle position change is optional. So, what can happen here is I can simply skill. So, okay, we'll see the Regeki being popped, but it is actually going to target the Spy. I was worried that something like that can happen, even though since we had passed the main phase, this was also a misplay on my end, not going for game instantly. But of course, what could have happened is on resolution of the skill, with the Gravekeeper's Curse being set, the Regeki could have activated to pop it. So by summoning the Spy here, in some ways it's a bait. I don't actually have a 3rd copy of Curse, but Username is where he then responds, and by this summon of Spy, basically, we guarantee game, as I simply skill, I set the card, I choose not to flip from the skill, so then I can flip summon, and that's game. And with that, Gravekeeper's effect burns, and that's the game. I think this was a very interesting match. It showcases a more aggressively made build of Peril that aims to burn faster, especially in game 1, and then I sided out into a slightly more control version that we didn't get to see much of actually. But a very interesting game. I think there's lots of feedback for both sides here, and just showcasing how both of this style of Armed Dragon can play. I think the Crystal Beast version is a really fun way to play the deck. And also just showcasing this small Gravekeeper's package in Desert's Peril, which I think more people should run, and they should not be running Guard. I think you should be committing fully to burn in this version of Peril. Of course, there's ways to run control, but I think sometimes I've noticed a lot of Peril builds happen to just run 3 Koala and no other way to burn, and then they kind of end up in this weird situation where they're trying to play kind of stun control style of gameplay, and then maybe look for the burn at some point. Meanwhile, the way I personally enjoy playing this deck that I wanted to showcase here is you just go in for the game. You commit to the burn and you attempt to burn the opponent. So I couldn't get to showcase everything this deck can do, but I think this was a very interesting game that highlights a lot of potential for both decks and a lot of interesting interactions and game plans and ways the game could have gone potentially. So thank you all for watching. I hope you had a good time with this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have a good one.